What up? What's up, guys? We're going to add my friend here. Let's see if this works.
What's up, man? How you doing?
What's up, bro?
I'm doing good.
I'm doing well. How are you? Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for being on here
I want to
tonight.
jump off with a question real quick. How was that turkey?
Okay. Oh my gosh, dude. That was, so guys, if you were following my story on Thanksgiving, I got the turkey recipe from Michael and his wife, and it was probably the best turkey that I've ever had.
It's the best one I've ever had too. And then we made soup with it afterwards. It was killer. And turkey's not like a thing that you want to keep going after, because it's usually dry. But the first time we did it, my mother, she came to us and then went home back to Houston. She lives in Houston. Bought a turkey and made one the next day. She loved it that much.
Dude, come on. I've always been like a ham guy, and now I'm like, dude, I am gonna keep doing this every year. Like, I wanted it for Christmas, so it was awesome. And you guys you're from Florida,
Atlanta. So we're from
Florida. I'm sorry, Texas.
I mean, I was born in America's Holy Land, which is Las Vegas. But my wife is from Dallas area. She went to Plano East, and then one of my kids was born in Dallas, and my other two kids were born in Houston. I spent a lot of time in Houston. My mother's from there. So all my family's from Texas. Yeah.
And then you guys are out in Atlanta? Nice. We'll be out there with Let Us Worship and everything soon, I think. I can't remember the Georgia stop.
Oh, cool.
We're going to be out there. Yeah. Have you heard of that? The Kingdom to the Capital
tour? you're rolling with Sean on that? That's cool. Yeah, let me know when you guys come to Atlanta.
I will, man. Okay, so tonight, the reason I wanted to do this live was because I saw that clip you did, and I started getting fired up, because that's what we need right now, and people are confused. And so maybe you could just share like a little bit of what was on your heart when you made that video, and we can kind of just like get into it. Does that sound good?
I'm trying to think fully what I even talked about. I know.
It was really about not bowing down to, to the government.
I was thinking about, the state of our nation, because, I did that film Super Spreader, and I interviewed a lot of people from, communist countries. And I was looking at, just how many people were bowing to fear and governmental pressure. And I've been studying other countries like the Czechoslovakia and Russia, Ukraine, and Germany, and thinking about what was it that allowed some people to stand up with resolve, where they were just willing to lay down their lives for the truth and not willing to compromise. And then there are other people who would just compromise because of fear. They wanted to protect their job or their family, and valid reasons a lot of times. But some people had a moral courage and the ability to stand in the midst of that, while others didn't. And I was, just thinking about the individual battles, because when I met with a guy named Joseph Bondarenko, and he was labeled KGB's most wanted. He'd spent over 10 years in prison, 3 different clips, about 50 years ago, for preaching the gospel. He preached the gospel. They'd throw him in jail. They'd send in psychotic murderers into his prison cell with him to try to torment him. He'd end up leading them to Jesus, and it would just totally piss him off, And then he'd come back out, and he's got a family, and he'd preach the gospel again, knowing the risk and go right back to jail. Come back out, preach the gospel, right back to jail. And it was at a time when they were trying to exterminate Christianity out of Russia. And so fast forward 50 years later, he goes back to the place, which is now modern day Ukraine, 2 blocks away from where he was in jail, goes to do this evangelistic crusade. About 800,000 people show up, and half of them give their lives to Jesus. And so you see this man who's willing to not compromise his faith, and then 50 years later, bam, the fruits of his prayer and his labors, and all of a sudden he sees this thing happen. But when I met with him, he just looked at me and said, "You must wake the church up." He said, "But do not compromise. Do not compromise." And I was just thinking about those individual little compromises that people make on a daily basis, where there's so many temptations with social media, and I was thinking about all the little things, whether it's food, people can't get their diets in order, or the temptation to tell a little lie. You know, I was thinking about Abraham when he first goes to Egypt and he lies about his wife being his sister because he was afraid, right? And soon after that, the Lord says, I'm your shield. Don't be afraid. I'm your shield, your great reward. And I was thinking about how we can take these little lies oftentimes to protect ourselves and let that be our shield instead of the Lord going before us. But anyway, going back to those not compromising things, I think if we're willing to submit our lives to God and allow him to purify us and strengthen our faith, that when those bigger situations come, whether it's government oppression or media, bearing down on us with lies 24/7, or your business or whatever, you can smell it, because you're like, man, I've been living in truth. And so when fear comes along to try to manipulate me, we'll be able to stand against those things. So that was kind of the heart, the essence of that. I just wanted to strengthen people and encourage people to win the little battles, because if we're a moral people, by the Spirit of God, not some crazy legalistic militant thing, but by the Spirit of God, where we're in love with Jesus and allow him to purify us, then we'll be the most dangerous people to those totalitarian regimes, because we can't be controlled by them, because we've already been controlled by Jesus.
That's right. Dude, the reason I was getting so fired up was because I just started taking classes for my master's at a Faith International University, and I was reading about the Maccabean revolt. I was reading about Hellenism, where like Alexander the Great would conquer these places, but then he would implement their way of life, the Greek way of life, which had its benefits. But what they started noticing was that stuff was creeping into the church. And that's actually what the Pharisees were birthed out of, was these people who stood firm on the word and were in impurity and said, we can't mix with culture. So like this woke stuff that we're experiencing, it's nothing new. It just looks different. Like basically some churches were starting to go woke. Even, we see the letters that Paul writes. He's like, you guys are doing stuff that the Gentiles aren't even doing. But the thing that was so crazy is that obviously the Pharisees hated Jesus because, they had pride, they had all these other things going on. And so they rejected the very person that they had been studying about forever. And so this is kind of what I wanted to dive into, was like you said, you can't be killed if you're already dead. And, we have people who are, they want to live the Christian life. They want to fight these battles, but they don't know how. And it's because we're still alive and we have a lot to lose. Like there's things at stake, like, and that's why it's so powerful hearing about these guys that you interviewed, because they've literally been beaten. And a lot of people, honestly, if you got beat and you knew what was coming, would you go back again? But like these guys are walking it out. And so I was just like, man, we need to go live. We need to talk about like, how do we equip the body, because we're talking about this, but like, how do we win the little compromises, the little wars, the little battles? Like what, you've got kids, like how are you raising your kids to win their little battles?
I think, first part of your question, how do we do that individually? I think like Paul says, he dies daily, and learning to lay down your life and surrender like everything to him. In my process, I've had to surrender my dreams. Like I've had to lay my Isaac on the altar multiple times. I had to like when I gave my life to the Lord, I said, Lord, I'm going to follow you, but there's 2 places on the planet I don't want to go. I don't want to go to Sudan, and I don't want to go to the West Bank of Israel. Within the year, I was living in the West Bank of Israel. He just dropped me off right in the midst of the Muslims, And I had to literally die to all, because I wanted to be an actor. I had to die to all my dreams, everything, and just follow that voice, follow him. And it causes us to crucify our flesh and all these fleshly desires. But he says, if you lose your life, you find your life. And when I went over there, bro, I had the most amazing time of my life. I loved those. I fell in love with those Muslim people. I had so much favor with them. It was the most amazing time of my life. And I realized on that moment that fear that was coming against me was trying to keep me from my destiny. Like God knew that my destiny was there, so this fear came against me. And so to point the question you said, how am I equipping my kids? One of the things I'm constantly trying to teach them is how to overcome their fears. That when they feel fear, it's oftentimes a go signal for them because the enemy's trying to keep them from their destiny and what they're called to do. And I don't know if
wow.
you know, because you have a military background, right? And so you like I feel like military guys understand faith more than most people because there's a simplicity of you get an order, you just go, right? The most greatest examples of faith in the Bible and the New Testament come from soldiers. Even Cornelius, you know, was a soldier. And so and there has to be a little bit of that militant side of us. I went to military school as a kid because I was a crazy thug. And so, but it taught me a ton of discipline, you know, and just to, I don't know. So I guess going back to your point, I guess, you know, the discipline side of things is important, but overcoming fears and not allowing that thing to overtake us, you know?
That's so good, man. And people push against discipline because, you know, I think maybe some hyper grace has floated around the church a little bit, which grace is amazing. But if grace can talk you out of discipline, then it's not from God. You know, that's false grace. And yeah, you know,
no, go ahead.
Do you have something to add to that? Oh, okay. I shared this before, but like I learned this when I was in Afghanistan. I had a sergeant pull me aside, and when I first got there, he's like, "Hey, you're already dead," and I'm like, all right, you know, like, welcome to the war, you know? And he goes, no, listen, if you try to make it home, you're going to die, or you're going to get someone hurt because you're going to be tense the whole time. You're going to be worried about your own life. It's biblical. Like, the guy didn't even know. He's preaching the Bible. If you try to keep your life, you're going to lose it. And he says, just do your job. You're in a war. You're already dead. Like,
Bro,
do your job.
So
and
powerful.
I felt this like tension I didn't even know I had just go away. And I was able to think clearly. And there was even a day where, you know, rocket attack came at our convoy, and I could feel the explosion on my face. Like, it was close. And the very next day, I had to get back up in that same turret on that truck. And I just remember thinking, you know what? I'm in a war. Like, what do I expect? You know, they're going to come out and hug me. And so I got back up in the gun, and I just went for it the next day. And this is exactly what Jesus was talking about. But we have a better, you know, we have better weapons. We have a better defense. Even David wrote, like, I don't trust in chariots. You know, some do. I'm not trusting in my sword or my bow. Like, I'm trusting in the Lord. And so I think in this culture of like, okay, we're trying to get masculinity to be a thing again, but also balancing that with like yielding to the Holy Spirit, being submissive. I think maybe we could take it this direction. Like, what does Christian submission really look like? Because for the last 3 years, we've been told submitting is supposed to look one way, and it got a little messy, to be honest.
Well, what way?
You know, how would you respond to that?
Have you seen it? What do you mean by it got messy?
So, you know, we were told we need to submit to mandates. We need to submit to this. And some churches said absolutely, and some churches said absolutely not. One church thinks they're submitting this way. The other one thinks they're submitting to God. So the other one's wrong. It was like, it was so, you know what I mean? How did you guys navigate that?
Yeah,
that was a tricky one for us.
It's interesting because I think I've studied a lot of communism and just I sniffed it out right from the get-go. And just stuff was not adding up. The level of fear, like fear was coming so intense, so quick. I remember the first time I was at a Dallas airport and I started to see masks, and I felt fear hit me, like, oh, this pandemic's here. But immediately I started praising God and going, God, I thank you that you said no pestilence shall come near my dwelling. And boom, the fear broke. And I was like walking with chills. I have got them right now. You can see on my arm. I don't know. Just talking about it. But for 20 minutes, I walked down the airport, and it's just still hit me because I just started developing this sacrifice of praise, practicing the presence of God instead of practicing the presence of demons through fear. And so, man, that fear became such a launching pad into God's presence for me in that season. So I saw that it was a spirit, and I saw that it break quickly, first off. And then, you know, I was looking at, you know, how churches were going, okay, we got to submit to government. we have to submit to. They were quoting that Romans verse, and yeah,
Yeah.
Romans 13
Romans
over
13.
and over again, right? And I get it. I love the intention of the heart of most of the pastors, I think, was to do the right thing in the beginning. I think everybody's trying to get their bearings, right?
Totally.
What's going on? What's happening? Let's shut down. Let's figure this thing out. And so I started looking at it, and I started seeing, man, when it wasn't starting to add up, and people weren't dying off like they say they were dying off, and I started seeing these epidemiologists come out with the Great Barrington Declaration saying, like, let's protect the vulnerable, but everybody else just go, let's live and be free. This is America. You can't shut down our businesses. You can't say this business can be open, but that business can be open. The strip club can be open, the bar can be open, but the church has to shut down. I was like, this doesn't make sense. Right. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we need to take a stand here. And so we jumped in with the Let Us Worship movement, kind of doing that thing. But I started looking back at the civil disobedience in a respectful way. Look at Rosa Parks. We're going to tell her, go sit in the back of the bus, obey government. We're going to tell Martin Luther King, oh, you can't march. You know, you need to go back and do what you're supposed to do. No, the laws were violating their conscience. They were violating the Bible and violating our freedoms. And much of these laws were violating not only biblical understanding, but they were violating the Constitution. You know, our right to gather, our right to assemble. And so I was like, man, these governors and governments, they're violating our own freedoms in the midst of this. And so I got to choose freedom, and I got to stick to the Bible too. I mean, people are getting sick, all these kind of things. I got to go, man, this is where our faith is truly tested. Do we really believe what we believe? And so, hey, it's on. This is war zone, wartime. We need to step up and step into the battle. We can't be sitting back in our houses, like, you know, in fear, shut off from the world. We got to be engaged in the battle and around the people who need us the most, you know?
Yes. And you know, was that super comfortable for you guys? Did every one of your friends love the decisions
we were
you were
crazy,
making?
You know? I mean, what the challenge of it is, because literally we had almost, I'd say 99% of the media outlets on the planet against what we were doing. Governors, mayors, literally coming after us, saying they're going to fine us, all this kind of stuff.
Getting fined and everything.
So I've never experienced that kind of pressure from the entire, you know, governmental media mechanism, industry, medical, all against what we're doing. We were literally the only musical tour on the planet going around. And so, yes, there's times we're in the middle of going, oh crap, what are we doing? Is this good? Are we good? Are we doing the right thing, God, you know? Yeah, we hear God.
Are we hearing God?
Time after time, we're seeing hundreds of people getting saved, people getting set free with suicide, depression. We're seeing a move of God take place. I'm going, man, God is on the move. We cannot stop this. People need to be in God's presence. So we were seeing the fruit of it. People weren't getting sick. It was outdoors. You know, we learned a lot, I think, going through it, even post looking back, but we definitely had to fight fear, you know, in the middle of it.
Totally. I think that's where we were at too. And guys, this isn't, we're not here to talk about mandates one way or the other. The point we're making is about being bold and sticking to your conviction, because at the end of the day, you're responsible before God for your actions and your faith. You know, Bible even says if anything not done in faith is a sin. I don't think we take that one very seriously. Yeah. And we do the comfortable thing when we know, man, I need to step out in faith here. But I think, too, a lot of people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. Hosea 4:6. We saw Romans 13 just thrown around. Submit to government, submit to government. Okay, so would we have said that to Daniel? Like, would we have told Daniel, hey, bro, bad luck, you should have just prayed with your windows?
Or just not pray at all.
Like, way to go, idiot. Right. Yeah, way to go, stupid. Now you have to go in the lion's den. Like, that's human wisdom, you know? But he said, no, I'm not going to be told what to do. And he went and what? He prayed like he always did. And I think it's important that we understand the context of submission and godly submission. A government, people submit to a government as a government submits to God. As soon as the government begins to do things that violate that, you know, succession here, this chain of command, so to speak, we go, hey, sorry, we're going to obey God. It's just like the 3 men in the fire. They're like, dude, we're not following your mandates. We don't give a crap about your fire. In fact, we serve a God. Even if we die, let it be known that we wouldn't bow. And I think it's like, how do we raise up a generation to have that kind of care where people say, look, even if I die, let it be known that I believe I'm hearing God and that I'm following God. Because we felt the same thing, man. We were ostracized by people in our own church. Like my own, one of my old worship leaders was criticizing us for going to the Seattle event.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Up in Chaz, which was nuts. It was so fun. But I'm like, what have we come to when the church is turning on itself? And that's when, many times I'd go to bed and I was like, man, am I in pride, or am I really following? I feel like I'm following God. I feel like my heart's pure. And, now that we're years past that and we're trying to get people to not bow down, it's like there's more things coming. And you were hitting on it. Like we have to have that secret place with the Lord. We have to win these little battles, because when the big one comes, like, when I it's like when I became a husband, when we put the ring on my finger, I didn't get endowed with all these like husband powers. Neither did you, right? You were the same man the next day that you were the day before. And I think it's like people are finding themselves in these situations and they're going, oh my gosh, I'm not ready for this. Like I should have been in the prayer closet. I should have been in the Word, and it's like, how do we keep sounding the alarm without, in the midst of being called Christian nationalists or super spreaders or whatever? Like, maybe that's where I'm going. I feel like I'm kind of rambling, but like, how did you keep pressing through in the face of all the doubt? Because I know there's going to be people watching. They're like, look, I tried that, but the doubt or the voices got so heavy. I didn't know what was up.
Yeah,
and what was down.
that's a great question. And I think we have to learn the voice of fear versus the voice of faith, and sometimes, like it says, the spirit and the flesh are in opposition, and flesh is often fear. And so sometimes you just got to do the opposite. For one, and I think we have to practice that in our daily life, in those small, like you said, the small victories. But I think one of the things I started looking at, and I just got tired of being a passive Christian, because I was like, most Christianity, we wait for problems to come to us or wait for something to happen. We're waiting on God. We're waiting. And I started looking at like God advancing the gospel or advancing his kingdom. When he was moving his people forward, it was always into enemy territory, and it was never safe. And for like 2 years, I've been hearing people say, be safe out there. Be safe out there. And I was like, there's no scripture that says be safe. I mean, could you imagine Joshua and Caleb? All right, guys, it's time to enter the promised land. Be safe out there. It's just never that.
Right.
It's always like, okay, God, even from the beginning, he's sending Adam and Eve into the earth where the devil already was. Right? That's not a safe plan to send your kids in there, right? Then it's like, okay, let's send a deliverer in with Moses. Okay, let's bring a baby when they're killing babies. Let's send him down the river. Let's put him in Pharaoh's house, the Antichrist camp, and let him be raised up. It's not a safe plan. Let's go into the promised land. Let's fill with giants. That's not a safe plan. Gideon, it's time to take your enemies. Your army's too big. Let's get smaller. Let's get it to where you're really freaked out and afraid. Jehoshaphat, it's time for the battle. Let's send the band in. Like over and over. Jesus, lambs amongst wolves.
Right.
It's just not safe. And you have to realize God is not safe.
No.
And I think we've preached this gospel of like safety and security and blessing. And yes, I love blessing and I love to feel safe. But man, I'd rather feel alive and I'd rather feel free and be free. And there's nothing more freeing and liberating than going right in the face of fears, going right into the enemy's camp, knowing that God's going to set a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and I get to see God show off in those situations. And so for me, I want to see God move. And he's not going to move if I'm being safe. You look at all those situations where people of God are advancing, it's never in a safe situation. And so I think what we have to do as men, we have to continue to model it, demonstrate it, and just keep walking with God and talking about that, talking about laying down your life, dying to yourself, not just being, pacifying all these fleshly desires, but maybe crucify the flesh. Maybe the message of the cross has to be
Yes.
preached, that we have to pick up our cross and die daily and enter into the sufferings of Christ. Because in that suffering place is where there's true life, actually. The most growth I've had in my life is always in the place of suffering. And so I think men, to raise up men, I think we're made for that, you know? And there's a spirit out there trying to castrate men and call it toxic masculinity, while at the same time celebrating women who act like men. It's like, it's what?
It's so backwards.
It's bonkers. I don't know. You get me fired up.
You got me fired up over here. If my son wasn't about to sleep, I feel like I'd be yelling. Dude, you nailed so many good things. I think, oh my gosh. So
sorry, yeah. I just went like I machine gunned you with like 50 things.
I feel like I got waylaid, but it was so good. Yeah, this is it. It's the message of the cross. It's literally, I just saw a video about this today. Literally, someone was saying, quit saying be safe. Like, I felt that, you know, I was a cop. I was in the Army Special Forces for 4 years. I was a cop after that for 5 in a bad area. I was in Federal Way, Washington, just south of Seattle. And, you know, we never said be safe to each other. We said, you need to be the most dangerous person in this city. And that's what true meekness is, actually. Like, you know, we used to say, like, don't mistake meekness for weakness. Meekness is, you know, you have the ability to completely decimate an entire area, but you don't, because of self-control or because of love or whatever it is. But you have that ability. And that it's like Reinhard Bonnke used to say this: a Christian might appear tame, but so does an electrical cord, until you grab onto it and you find out what's inside. And it's like, would we become those kind of Christians who we're not walking around and we're trying to pacify everything? I even remember Jesus, he said, do not even think that I came for peace. I came bringing a sword. Why would he say, was Jesus not about peace? No, that's not what he's saying. What happens when two nations are in a war and they want to stop? They sign a peace treaty. And in a peace treaty, you have compromises on both sides. And Jesus is like, hey, I know how you guys think peace happens, compromise. I didn't come to do that. I came bringing a sword. I'm bringing the truth that's going to divide in every possible intimate way you can think of. And then you've got Paul talking in Philippians 1, and he builds on this, and he goes, listen, for to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but to suffer for his sake. And we've become a church of like, yes, all your promises are yes and amen, and we're singing the worship song, but we're not thinking about the promises of suffering, of persecution, the charge he gave to the disciples before they went out, like, hey, you guys, you know, they're going to hate you, they're going to mock you, they're going to say evil things. Like, we think that every type of pushback is, you know, where's God? Why is he not protecting me? I thought this. And it's like, dude, this was promised. Totally. This stuff is promised to us. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about people who, and I'm seeing comments, people saying, hey, this is for me, I'm dealing with fear. So I'm glad that this is speaking to you guys. But I'm thinking about 1 Peter 4. He begins talking about the ways that the Gentiles are living. And he's like, lewdness, drunkenness, abominable idolatries, all these things. And he says, this is how we used to live. Now that we're not living that way anymore, they're going to think that it's strange that you're not running the same direction as them. And I wonder if we have too many people, maybe some of you guys who are even listening tonight, if you would reflect on yourself. Look, we're not judging anybody. We're saying, do a self-reflection. Are you running the same direction as the world to avoid pushback? Because just like Michael's talking about, if you start doing that, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. Like, a little bit of compromise is going to spread, and you're going to sear your conscience, you're going to shipwreck your faith, and when the moment comes to stand on truth and be on the right side of history, you're going to keep your mouth shut, or worse, you're going to go with the flow. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's what we're seeing.
I think a big part of it is, there's a scripture that says, without prophetic revelation, people cast off restraint. So I think people don't have a true vision of the kingdom and what we're called to do in this earth. They don't understand their purpose, so they don't know what they're aiming their life at. And so if they don't have that prophetic revelation or vision, they're casting off the restraints. Like, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I might as well just smoke this or drink this. They're bored to death a lot of the times. Right. But the opposite is true. If you do have prophetic revelation, you know what you're going after. You put constraints on, right? Like if you know you're about to get in the ring and fight Mike Tyson in his prime back in the day, you're not drinking, you're not smoking, you're eating the most perfect food. You're gonna like refine your life because of you know what you're called to. And I think there's a big part of our generation that does not know what they're called to. They don't understand the sacrifice that it takes to lay down your life and follow God into what he has called you to. And when you do, like passion, constraints, I think they naturally come on. At least they have in my life. It's not like I haven't had struggles. Yeah. But the things that I used to desire back in the day before I was a believer, when I got hit with God, I was like, man, that stuff is so lesser than following the voice of God. It's so life-giving. Because all that other stuff, it may soothe you for a moment, but it comes with chains. Whereas if you're willing to suffer for the moment, it comes with liberty. Right? And so.
Right. And no one had to tell you all these things are wrong. Like, once you got born again,
I had to get my mind renewed. I still had some crazy thinking, but my desires weren't bent towards that kingdom. It was bent towards God's kingdom. You know?
Right. Bro, that verse, that hit me a different way tonight. That
without prophetic
revelation,
people
what'd
cast
you say
off
without
restraint.
I don't know that verse. Dude, that is epic. That like defines my first 25 years of life, growing up in the church, but my idea of salvation was pray a prayer to go to heaven. And so I'm thinking, well, I'm going to be in heaven someday, but what do I do till then? And you're just waking up. I'm in the book.
Yeah.
God knows my heart, and you're waking up, and at best you're trying not to sin, and it's like, that's dead. That's stupid. And when you said that, I think it's 1 John, where it talks about a person who thinks about the return of Jesus. When they have this in their mind, it says they purify themselves.
Yep.
The person who has that hope of his return, they purify themselves. And guys, you need to hear this tonight. The prophetic revelation of your life is to look at Jesus and understand that he is coming back one day as a king and a judge. And that if you focus on that every day, you will purify yourself. You won't need a pastor to do it for you. You won't need an accountability partner, which those things are great. But you'll look at Jesus, and just like we're talking about, when I got born again, no one had to tell me to stop looking at porn. When I got born again, no one had to tell me, hey, you shouldn't lie to people and manipulate them. Like, I just knew, or I would do it, and then I was like, oh, wait, that felt horrible. Okay, I'm not supposed to do that anymore. It's like we need a generation to fix their eyes on Christ so that they're not concerned. It's like keep your eyes on the heavens so you don't trip over your own feet type of deal. Because, I feel like we're entering an hour as a people where I think the pressure is going to be turned up, actually. I mean, what do you think? Because I don't think that, hey, we're past COVID and now we're
you can see that they're already scheming, planning with the food situation. They're trying to get everybody in some type of a tracking system. They're doing it in a bunch of other nations. America, thank God we have the Constitution. We have a bunch of crazy folks that are still here that still want to be free because we know what freedom is. And a lot of those other nations, they've just lived under government control. So they just like, well, this is what we do. They don't have the bearings for it until it's too late.
That's true. Well, man, you know what? I would love to maybe wrap this up. If you would would you just kind of give a prophetic revelation over some of these people who might be, just like they're struggling with their purpose, or they're struggling with their vision. They're struggling with, how do I navigate all of this?
So you mentioned that scripture about the Lord's return, or his coming. And I believe that he wants to come to you daily.
Yeah.
And there's a coming of the Lord daily. And I think when one of my favorite verses in Colossians 3, it says, you have died. and your life is
Yes.
hidden with Christ.
It
Right? It's hidden
with
and it
Christ.
says, set your
Yep.
mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are in the earth. When you set your mind on the things that are above where Christ is seated, then Christ, who is your life, appears. When you have that revelation of him, then you appear with him in glory. And so there's something about the power of worship in this season to strengthen us like David. David got his strength when people were coming against him, his friends were coming against him, they were wanting to stone him to death. He said he would strengthen himself in the Lord. And so the way that he strengthened himself in the Lord was he had to go and magnify God. He would go get in the presence of God. He would set his mind on the things that are above. Oh, lift up your heads, oh, you gates. Lift them up that the King of glory may come in. When the King of glory comes in, you behold him, you get to behold you because you're made in his image. And we're changed in that same image from glory to glory. And then you begin to look at him, you're like, wait a minute, I see him with the eyes of my heart, and maybe this part of me is not quite lining up right. And so that part can just, wait, that thing needs to fall aside. And now I can see clearer where I'm supposed to go and who I'm supposed to be. And so the power of worship is so key to strengthen us and to strengthen our hearts, especially if you're feeling fear. Because when you're feeling fear, your problem has been magnified. It's been magnified in your mind, and it's dominating your mind and your heart. And so the problems, the concerns, the worries. And so the power of worship to get our minds up and above that. And sometimes your worship has to be aggressive and almost violent to get above those fleshly things. Because the fleshly thing wants us to shrink back, to get in our closet, to just sit down, pull the sheets over. I don't want to leave my house. I better drink to feel better. I better do this. No. Cast all that off and lift up a sacrifice of praise to God 24/7. Because you think about this. When COVID was happening and the media was running fear 24/7, you looked outside everywhere you went. You were constantly aware of a virus, something that you cannot see. So the enemy made us aware of something that's invisible. Right. If the enemy can do that, then we should be made of an invisible God, aware of an invisible God way much more often than that. And if we are, then we're going to be advancing, taking territory. We're going to recognize the lies because we're not going to be living in the lies. We're going to be living in the truth. And so we won't be bowing to the governmental pressure, media pressure, peer pressure, because we've died to all that stuff and we're living for God. We can't be bought because we already sold out to Jesus. So my prayer for you guys is that you learn to become a worshiping warrior in this hour, to live not by lies, even the little white lies in your own life. You let those things die. You learn not to compromise because you're setting your eyes and your heart upon Jesus, and he will guide your steps in a righteous way. And those constraints will naturally come upon your life because you're not looking to the right or to the left. You're fixing your eyes upon Jesus. He's real, and he's a real destination, a real destiny. He is your promised land. And he wants you to be lit up and on fire, not in fear, not in insecurity. He wants you to be living bold and full of faith. And so that's my prayer for you in Jesus' name.
Come on. Bro, amen. Oh my gosh, dude. I want to start jumping around. That's it. Guys, Todd White said this. He said, if I lit you on fire, would you care what anyone around you thought about you? Like, if I doused you in gasoline and I lit you on fire, would the opinions of man have any weight in your life? No. You're consumed with the fire. And it's not just a cute saying. Like, if you can't pick that up from what he's saying when he's talking right there, it's not just because he's a good communicator. Like, the Spirit of God is speaking right now, and you can see the passion. And this doesn't come because we just hop on lives and we talk about Jesus. This stuff comes from the secret place. This stuff comes from sitting alone with God when no one else is looking, for no other motivation than to know him. When you pick up your Bible and you're like, God, I need to become this word. I need to become this very thing. I don't want to be informed. I want to be transformed. When you do that, when no one is looking, I'm telling you, and this is what Michael's saying, you're going to begin to be changed on the inside. I want to ask you guys, as we close this isn't a judgmental statement. I just want to ask, when is the last time that you just sang a song to God from your heart? Have you ever just sat alone in a room and just began to sing a song to him? Have you ever just sat alone with God and just began to talk to him? You're not asking him for stuff. You're not coming to him for anything. You're just loving on him. Guys, this is the great privilege that we have. You see, Christianity is so much bigger than going to heaven. It is Jesus making a way for us to get to the Father. And what we've been saying all night is if your eyes are on the Father, you'll learn who you are. You won't let a world who doesn't even know who they are tell you who you are. And you
That's right.
definitely won't bow down.
He's a Father. He wants to speak daily.
So good, man. Well, thanks for coming on here. I feel like I'm ready to go run.
Winding down here with my kids. I'm all fired up now.
I know, seriously. Well, bro, it was such a privilege. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me on. Anytime. I'll be down.
This was like so fiery.
All right, you too.
Absolutely, man. Have a great night. All right, see you guys.